So in this room, the Albert room, which we're calling the Charles Dickens room, Gerald and I have bought a whole series of artifacts from home, so books, reference books, information about various clubs, elements here, which I'll talk through in a minute. But what we've got here is a replica of Charles Dickens' reading desk. The original desk is in the museum at Doughty Street in London, but it's exactly the same as this. And when Gerald is on tour, he uses this desk to perform for it. And it was a desk, it's an exact copy of what Charles Dickens had. And Charles Dickens designed it with specific usage in mind. So this is a very faithful replica. And then this chap here, Gerald has toured America for over 30 years. And one of his principal backers is a company called Buyer's Choice. And Buyer's Choice make a whole series of figurines, generally Christmas-based, carolers. And on his last tour, as a surprise, they made a miniature Gerald, which is great fun. One of the questions people always ask when you say, hello, my surname is Dickens, and they say, are you related? And you say yes, and the first thing they say is, do you all write? Well, it's interesting, because actually there has been a lot of writers. Monica Dickens, hugely successful author in the 50s and 60s, that was her autobiography. And SAS Jungle Frontier, Night Action, Narvik, all written by my uncle, Captain Peter Dickens, who had a very illustrious naval career. Memoirs of my father, written by Sir Henry Fielding Dickens, so my great-grandfather. And Mums's recollections, or his wife's recollections of her career. My grandfather, Admiral Sir Gerald Dickens, very much a military book, Bombing and Strategy. Lucinda Dickens Hawksley, who is has published many books, one on Lizzie Siddal, one on Katie Dickens' daughter, Dickens of Travel, and so on. And then this chap, Cedric Dickens, who was more like Mr. Pickwick than Mr. Pickwick, larger-than-life characters. And so it's not surprising he's done a book about dining with Dickens and drinking with Dickens. And then in amongst that, Gerald has published several of his books. And when I finished sailing around the world in 2001, I too had my book Sea Change published. So everything on this table has been written by a member of the Dickens family, which is quite fun. Sadly, none of them has sold nearly as well as any of our great-great-grandfathers. So this normally sits in my study, and it's a family tree of Charles Dickens, colour-coded. So Charles and Catherine married in red, and then their children in yellow across here. And there is Henry Fielding Dickens and his wife Marie Dickens, who married, and they had 7 children, one of which was Admiral Sir Gerald Dickens, his wife Pearl. That's my grandparents. They had 3 sons, Peter, Claude, and David. David married Betty and had 4, my sister Liz, me, my younger sister Nikki, and there's Gerald. And then our children and grandchildren. And it's interesting that Dickens had 10 children in total, 9 became adults, but only 2 had issue that continue today. So the eldest boy, Charlie, who had daughters who married, and the Dickens surname vanishes, and the 8th child, Henry, who had this line, and it's through Henry that the Dickens surname continues. So a little section here on various Dickens clubs and societies. So this straw boater is part of the uniform, along with this tie, to the Pickwick Bicycle Club. And in 1870, cycling was becoming popular. And a group of cyclists in London said, we should have a club. What should we call it? Well, Charles Dickens had died the week before. So Dickens was very much in the news. And they said, we should call it after something Dickens. And Pickwick was a great club of gentlemen. So they wrote to the family, said, can we call it the Pickwick Bicycle Club? And the family said yes. And it's still going. So it's the oldest Pickwick society in the world. They have a couple of dinners or lunches at the Connaught Rooms each year, and it's great fun. And very much a cycling industry club. Where are we? It's disappeared. There was a tie here from the Dickens Pickwick Club, which was created by my uncle Cedric. We celebrated our 50th birthday last year with a big dinner, and Charles Brandreth was our guest of honour. So those are various elements of the Dickens Pickwick Club. There's also the City Pickwick Club, and we both meet at an old chop house in London called the George and Vulture. And it's a great place. Charles Dickens loved eating there, and he set chapters of Pickwick Papers there too. So that's still our HQ at the old George and Vulture. And we meet there once a year for our annual general meeting, in which port features quite heavily, which is why this flag is here. Any mariner will know that this flag is the I for India flag, and when you hoist that flag on your ship, it means I am altering course to port. So when the Stilton arrives, I fly that flag, and we all alter our course to port and have several other classes. And then over here, the top hats represents a walk my brother and I did in 2012, where we walked from Portsmouth to London to raise money for the Charles Dickens Statue Fund and to raise money for the National Literacy Trust. And the walk we did is included in Nicholas Nickleby, where Nicholas and Smike walked from London to Portsmouth. So we thought we'd do the same, and we did the entire walk wearing top hats and a sign on the back saying we're walking, the reason why we were doing the walk. And 2 years later we raised the money and the statue appeared, and it now sits in the Guildhall Square in Portsmouth. And what's lovely at the Isle of Wight, if you're a fan of Dickens, come to the Isle of Wight via Portsmouth, go and visit the Birthplace Museum in Portsmouth, go to the Guildhall Square and see the statue of Dickens, then jump on the hovercraft, zoom over to Ryde, and head over towards Ventnor and the Royal Hotel. It's where people go to, the Americans go to Stratford to do Shakespeare. People should come to Portsmouth and then the Isle of Wight to do Dickens. And then here a whole range of different books. Sir Henry Fielding Dickens, who became the Common Sergeant in the City of London. He presided at the Old Bailey and was a very respected High Court judge. He was knighted too in 1922, so he was knighted in 22, and then his son, a naval officer, was knighted in 1937. So incredible to have father and son as a Sir. And there's a book here as an example, which where we're so lucky as a family that so many people are so interested in Dickens, they research extraordinary aspects of his life. And this book, called Bleak Health, was published by a doctor, a GP, and he was a Dickens fan, and he was interested in the medical elements of Dickens. So he's researched every letter that Dickens ever wrote to his doctor or physician saying, I have these symptoms or I'm feeling that. And he read them and then applied modern medical understanding to say, I know what he was suffering from. So it's an extraordinary insight into the treatments that Dickens had. For example, when he was in America, he complained constantly of headaches and nausea. Yet when he got on the steamship to come home, it all disappeared. And when he described the symptoms, the doctor, Nick Cambridge, realised he was suffering from carbon monoxide poisoning because he was travelling in railroad cars with charcoal burners giving out fumes. He was in theatres with real burning stage lights. So he was consuming this gas all the time, and it was slowly poisoning him, hence the dizziness and the vomiting. But the moment he got on the ship into the fresh air, vanished. So we're very lucky to have these extraordinary insights into Dickens and aspects of his life. So there's a range of books that cover aspects of that, including this interesting little one, which was published in the 70s, Dickens on an Island. So it was great that somebody had already said there's a story to tell here, and told the tales about the time Dickens was here. Richard Hutchings published it. And then finally, like every good museum, you've got to have an exit through the gift shop, and that's exactly what this is. So Gerald is selling copies of his book, Dickens and Staplehurst. Dickens was involved in a terrible train crash 5 years to the day before he died, and it had a huge effect on his life. He's also published a book on his tours with the Christmas Carol and performance notes, and a couple of DVDs on his performances. And I've got a range of greeting cards, all based on very bad puns. I mean, this one, for instance, courgette. And this one in a DIY shop in Cowes, Isle of Wight. And so I come up with these thoughts and I illustrate them myself. And I have a shop in Cowes and another in Ryde who stock them. And they do okay. And I call them paintings by Boz. So when Dickens started writing, he wrote his short stories under a pseudonym, and he called them sketches by Boz, in case anybody thought his writing was questionable. So I thought, well, I'm illustrating for the first time, so I'll take the same idea and call it paintings by Boz. And I just do the little illustrations in a book like this, and then add the headline. So this one, the chap Edmund's boat sails, and the headline says, "This is a lovely little ship. It does 100,000 miles to the galleon." So they're all bad puns, but people seem to like them. So yeah, it's good fun.